Pirate software might need to be studied on what not to do as a content creator, by not knowing what influence he had to even not knowing how to sometimes be a decent person. Pirate software's downfall not only seems satisfying to his audience, but one that happened because he simply could not understand what he was reading, and he did not understand sometimes how to be a good person, with his ego being one of the main issues as to what his downfall ended up being, telling a cautionary tale to all creators that they are not infallible. Pirate software, also known as Jason Thor Hall, started his career in software development, specifically in gaming. He worked at a studio called Blizzard, who actually created World of Warcraft among many other games back in 2004. He only worked there for a little bit of time before he ended up quitting to go work for Amazon Studios. And then after he worked there for a little bit, he worked for the US government as a hacker, but he didn't seemingly find his passion there or what he even wanted to do until he quit all of that to pursue his own company named Pirate Software. And at the same time when he was creating this company, he was also live streaming and trying to build his channel, which he named after his company. He wanted the channel to showcase his skills as a developer, but also go through how to become a developer and specific tricks, to even showing his love of games and playing them. In early 2022, he was on a live stream where he was talking directly to an inexperienced game developer who was uncomfortable sharing his game to the public. Jason gave this person invaluable advice, telling them that they're never really ever going to fully get over that anxious feeling about releasing something, but should do it anyway. This clip was shortened and then posted onto YouTube Shorts, and what started out with just a couple thousand views, Jason quickly noticed that the views started to skyrocket and eventually hit over 800,000 from potentially an unknown page. He then started posting a lot more snippets onto YouTube Shorts and decided to go all in on that, which garnered him tens of millions of views almost overnight. The comments from his videos range from people absolutely loving his content to other developers looking for content like this that felt inspired and was also educated alongside content that was very much heavily on storytelling. And it was quite clear that at this point in time there were really no content creators like Jason. Content creators that were almost allowing their viewers to look at gaming development skills and have an online mentor, someone they can get advice from, but also content that wasn't boring by any means. While for the most part, YouTubers or content creators in the development space typically just give step-by-step tutorials rather than making the content actually interesting. And even several comments echoed saying that they had been looking for a channel like this, and Jason seemed to have filled that gap seamlessly. It had been pretty clear at this point in time that he was someone that everyone really needed, and it almost felt like he could not fail at this point, as his audience very strongly loved him and felt inspired by him. But things started to take a sharp turn, and the cracks in his personality started to break when people started to notice the first signs of his ego, and what would eventually become his complete downfall and ruin his entire career. In early 2025, he was part of a guild for World of Warcraft, and decided to stream with his fellow teammates from that guild. At one point, it started to become really dangerous in the game, and Jason ended up leaving the scene to leave his teammates there to die. The interesting thing about this version of the game that they were playing was that if any characters were to die, that character is dead forever and cannot come back. So leaving the player there to die is quite literally letting the player die. The gamer would then have to start again from the beginning with a completely different new character once death happened. When Jason decided to leave his teammate in a really dangerous situation, a lot of people even in the stream started to accuse him of becoming a traitor.
Why are you walking, bro?
Saying it was quite obvious that he was not a team player. However, what he could have done at this moment in time was simply apologize for it and potentially even move on. But instead, he decided to double down on this, claiming the other players knew exactly what they were doing when they entered that dangerous situation, and it was completely their fault. To even saying that he has a really large audience and his audience was invested in that character, so he needed to take shelter and save himself so as to not lose the character that his audience is invested in. And then even saying that the team did not listen or take his advice on which direction to go into the game, and ultimately it was their fault why they ended up dying. There was a lot of backlash with this, but ultimately, as you can imagine, this backlash would not become so big. Many might be frustrated by this, but eventually they move on, as this is not a situation that would affect the general public. However, once it did and Jason started to show the same egotistical personality, that's when things really started to come crashing down for him. But before we talk specifically about what he did, we need to give the backstory on a channel called Accursed Farm. This channel was started by someone named Ross Scott, and in 2024 he ended up starting a movement that wouldn't be the reason for Jason's downfall until later in 2025. The movement was called Stop Killing Games, and essentially was trying to get studios to stop ending the life of games even after the studio no longer wanted to fund the game. Software developers had kept up with this trend of even if consumers bought the game, they could decide to end the game at any point in time, stopping the consumer from ever playing that game ever again, even though they had purchased it. The movement was to end that by allowing consumers to have access to the game offline offline should the studio decide to stop running the servers, allowing the consumers to essentially own the game outright indefinitely. The movement was funded by a UK petition in which, if the petition received over 1 million signatures, the UK legislators will actually have to look at this petition and try to enforce a law for it, with the key features of this movement being that the game must be disconnected from the servers and that the publishers must sell the game to the purchasers in a functioning state. This would cause companies and corporations to no longer own the game anymore should they decide to no longer run the game anymore, and the game would only be available to those who had purchased the game. The movement started picking up a little bit of steam and was doing really well, as several other small pages were talking about it. And after Ross dropped the video talking about it, many of the viewers were on board and decided to spread the message as far as they could, with Ross's channel only having less than 500,000 followers, and a lot of those viewers likely were not from the UK, and the petition needed UK signatures. It was evident to the viewers of Ross that he would need help and a lot more to get the word out there. Now, Jason Hall had talked about previously wanting the gaming world to be available for future generations, and one of the reasons why he was so passionate about software development is that he was hoping that the next generation of gamers will have games available to them. So of course, that being his mission, his brand, and his channel, audiences were quick to push this petition to Jason in hopes that he would endorse it and get millions of people by this movement. What was shocking to people was when Jason decided to live stream and talk about the petition, he not only said he wouldn't endorse it, but he would encourage other people to not endorse it as well. Jason Hall thinks the movement idea is too much to ask for developers, stating it would be really hard or even impossible for some types of games to keep running forever, especially games that need to connect to other players online all the time, like big multiplayer games or games that rely on community-created content. He's worried that if the movement's rules become law, it could stop the game makers from creating certain types of games or make it way too expensive or complicated for them. Basically, the rules might backfire and hurt the game industry instead of helping players, essentially saying that the petition of the movement was way too vague and could cause a lot of ripple effects within the gaming world. However, the audience did not see it that way, and shortly after the movement went into 2025, it began to slow down Steam and slow down around 400,000 signatures. And at this point, it really wasn't getting any signatures at all, and essentially it was almost declared dead, and it was never projected to hit the 1 million mark ever. This was when Ross decided to do something that he had never thought he would do. When Jason decided to make that stream talking about how he would not endorse the movement, all Ross did was address the misconceptions of the movement and tried to talk about it without dropping any names to avoid any drama. However, it was clear that the damage that Jason had allegedly done was already really far in, and he had to spread a lot of information that Ross believed was incorrect to his own audience, and that damage was done. The petition had slowed down in signatures, to then which Ross ended up finally addressing the situation and addressing Jason directly, and made a huge long video debunking every single claim that Jason had made about the movement. And this was the best thing that he could probably have done. Due to that, the petition started to pick up steam again. And even prior to him dropping this video, a familiar face ended up posting about this movement, someone you might all know named Charlie. And soon after, Jacksepticeye and PewDiePie were all brought into this movement, bringing the movement into a huge mainstream audience and regaining thousands of signatures per day, all of them talking about how Jason was in the wrong in his approach and what he did, to even many condemning him for his actions and trying to allegedly stop this movement. Jason has since then come out to talk about this and explained that he himself was never the reason why the movement stopped losing steam, saying that people should be critical and use critical thinking when deciding to support a movement or not, and it should not be based on his own words alone, with many arguing that he did in fact stop the movement with his words, with a graph showing the signature dropping steam almost completely right after his video dropped. However, we won't actually know what is going on with that, as that is just speculation. Since then, Jason has been flooded with hate comments and dislikes on all his videos, and many don't believe he has taken any breaks. So will this be something that will roll over in the near future, or will this continue to follow him for the foreseeable future?